Welcome to Saturday's Warrior and happy new Big 12 day. Here on the channel, we talk BYU, Big 12, realignment, and more. And with Texas and OU officially exiting the conference and the four corner schools now joined, the Big 12 now goes nearly coast to coast with some new teams without a lot of history playing. So I've asked Clint Foster of the Biggest 12 show, and he makes. I'm sure you've seen him by now. If you haven't, we'll get to that. But some really funny videos covering Big 12 stuff, and he also tells me he's all around good guy, and so he is here to help us discuss what some of these new rivalries, how that might play out in this new version of the Big 12. Clint, thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for having me. I love that you threw in the alleged there. He tells me he's a great guy. Like, oh, okay, yeah. Thanks, Trev.
Well, I tend to want to believe you, but based on your hat, I'm a little skeptical. So,
well, doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can.
Because from my experience from recent years, TCU has not been very nice to BYU. So, anyway, moving on.
Bullying is a lost art,
Yeah. So, so the thought behind this video is kind of, well, some of it stemmed first from, as I mentioned, you make some really hilarious videos about the Big 12, and you did one. This is recurring from last year when we had new additions to the Big 12, but the rivalry draft, and
Yes.
it's really funny, and I love seeing it. And I think you're spot on with a lot of that. And so this video is kind of like, well, who are the rivals, especially in this newest version of the Big 12? We got a lot of new teams facing each other with limited to almost no history. And so where are those rivalries going to come from? We know that there's some really good ones and some really long-standing rivalries in the conference, but also some less formed. So I want to go through that. So not only was it your video that helped generate this idea, but also being a TCU fan, you have, oddly enough, been in a conference with, I think, almost every single one of these schools prior to, the Big 12. Well, so you were in Conference USA, so you overlapped with Cincy and Houston there. Well, in Houston
Yes.
with the Southwest as well, and then you were in with BYU and Utah in both the WAC for a short time, and then the Mountain West as well.
Yeah.
And so you were even admitted to the Big East, although you never officially joined and played, but that, when West Virginia and Cincy were there. And so the only schools really, I think, are the Arizona schools and UCF that you haven't really been in a conference with prior to this. So theoretically, you guys have a lot of experience with a lot of these schools and these traditions and understanding of what kind of makes these schools tick and what would drive some of these rivalries. And so is that right? I mean, do you feel like you've got a sense for these schools?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, there's a reason I didn't hang up the Utah shirt behind me, right? Yeah, I mean that is an interesting thing. Yeah, that you point out about TCU is that we do have so many. We made so many pit stops between the Southwest Conference and the Big 12. We have a lot of micro history with a lot of these teams. But yeah, and you're right. Utah coming into the conference, we bringing back the Holy War. That's fantastic. That's a pre-existing rivalry. Territorial Cup between these two is a solid one, and Colorado's got some existing rivalries with the Big 8 schools. But yeah, for the most part, it's a lot of building new history, and that was kind of the inspiration for my rivalry draft videos, which you absolutely should check them out if you haven't. Put a lot of work into those, and how do you figure out who UCF is going to hate, right? How do you figure out who Cincinnati is going to hate? They've only really ever played West Virginia and TCU, and a lot of the stuff in the videos is just kind of like gags, like, hey, let's do Cowboys and Indians things with Utah and Oklahoma State, right? Even though there's no real regionality connecting them. But it's an interesting topic to discuss, and I'm excited I'm pumped to go through it with you here, man.
So before we get to that, and because you mentioned your videos and some of and some of the gags there that you had, but how do you go about, because each school that you have represented in your videos has kind of personification. So how do you go about forming those personifications, and how much of that is just based off of what you know of the school, and do you do research, or how do those manifest?
Yeah, sometimes it's stereotypes. I mean, I should say often it's stereotypes. Or I tend to try and grasp onto little things like Oklahoma State is kind of like my stock, like uber Republican character, which really has no basis other than the fact that Mike Gundy wore an OAN shirt one time that was controversial. And Oklahoma's a pretty red state, so I'm like, okay, let's just make Oklahoma State the very Republican character, right? And that's
Right.
just something that I can tend to go back to. I mean, with Utah's the guy who didn't want to be here, right? And that just comes from Twitter. All of the interactions with Utah fans thinking that they were too good for the conference, and the Pac-12 is never going anywhere, and whoops, guess we got to come. So it's little things like that, and obviously like BYU, like we're gonna go for the stereotype of the uber nice, uber clean cut Mormon guy, who's wearing a tie and a dress shirt, so yeah. And sometimes I work in things from personal experience, but for the most part, I try to do stereotypes or things that are going to be relatable to a wide swath of people. But what's interesting is you talk about research. I am working on a video right now, my first ACC related video with all of that news that's breaking. And there's been a lot of, okay, what is Pitt's deal? I don't know. Like what is Pitt known for? And happened to like cruise some Reddit forums and like figure things out. And like, all right, well, I guess this is what I'm going to roll with.
Love it. I love it. And then of course you got to get all the merch for each school.
Yes. Yeah. Which is always a process.
Yeah.
Always a process.
Yeah. All right. So let me see here. Let me get all my screens set up. But what I was thinking here, and maybe I should have, we're just gonna roll with this because I didn't run this by you ahead of time. So what I envision here is,
ooh, look at that.
Yeah. So we got each school. We talked about potentially 3 rivals. So this just kind of help us keep track as we slide them over, that we can see that each one has been there. But we'll just kind of place them as we go. Oops. I've left those up there. So I got a head start on us. So
there you go.
So, but yeah, that shouldn't be a surprise. That's one of the 4 protected rivalries, and one that you already mentioned in the top of the video. But I'd say we just kind of roll through it and see how it shakes out and see if it makes sense or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are several that we can go ahead and fill in, right? We can go ahead and fill in the Holy War. We can fill in Farmageddon and the Sunflower Showdown. Those immediately come to mind. And from here on out, there's a lot of conjecture, right? Man, you really put some effort into this. Look at you. You've even got like the right number of logos. I'm impressed, right? This is great. This is great.
Got to be prepared. It couldn't do, there was enough room for 4 rows. And so Utah just has to hang out here on the edge, which I'm okay with.
Well, that's fine. They deserve to be over there.
Exactly. In their own row. That's where they want to be anyway. So,
right. Yeah. If I may speak to TCU's 3, because I think TCU has a very obvious 2, and then the third I think is a little up for debate. So Baylor and Tech are absolutely TCU rivals, locked in, absolutely no doubt about it. And then for the third, I tend to waffle between BYU and Utah, to be honest, because when I look at all of these other teams, like, yeah, there's some recent animosity with K-State that's been kind of fun. There's a fun little friendly rivalry with West Virginia that's kind of fun. But the history with BYU and Utah, those are 2 teams that we were competing for conference championships with, and it was very heated there for several years. With BYU, you have the fellow religious school aspect. I mean, TCU is kind of a religious school in name only, to be honest. And then Utah is just very fun to hate. Let's be honest about that too. So I'm really between the 2 of them for TCU's third rival, personally.
Okay, well, let's fill in some of these others and then see how it shakes out and see what makes most sense, because we're trying to be economical here and make it kind of even across the board. I tried to avoid like any bunch of like one-sided rivalries, where it's one way and not the other. So
to be fair, that's TCU and Baylor recently.
Well, no. I'm sorry, I meant like one side. Yes, in terms of like with Texas, how everybody hated Texas.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like. And so wherever you could put Texas on like everybody's board here, but trying to do kind of an even number across, but we'll see if it works out that way. I have a question to backtrack half a second because and I totally agree with you about the TCU, Utah, BYU thing, which we'll get into. But Kansas State, who is their primary rival? Because Farmageddon is arguably bigger than the Sunflower Showdown, but this is the in-state rival.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where recent history plays a big role, right? I mean, K-State never wants to lose to Kansas, but I feel like a K-State fan gets way more hyped for the Iowa State game these days. I mean, to me, that may be the best rivalry in the entire conference right now, is K-State, Iowa State. When you look at the quality of the two teams, they've been playing for, jockeying for position at the top half of the conference a lot more than they haven't lately. And that game last year was just so freaking fun. Yeah, that's the primary rival there to me.
Well, I had a visitor here join me for a second. So, yeah, no, I agree with you. That it is a legit rivalry, but do they see it as, I don't know, like, where's there more hate? Like, if you were to go to Manhattan and, like, who do they hate more versus what's better on the field? Obviously, Kansas hasn't been good at football for so long until recently.
Yeah.
That maybe that's led to, the rivalry with Iowa State growing a little bit more.
Who they hate more? They probably hate Kansas more. I mean, I wish I had John Grove or some other K-State guys on the show to speak to it for themselves, but I feel like Kansas State fans despise Kansas, like with every fiber of their being. But there's less heat to the rivalry right now, just because K-State hadn't won, or Kansas hadn't won in like 14 years or however long it's been.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll leave Iowa State ahead there on that rivalry. And you'd say Baylor's your primary rival?
Oh, absolutely. Again, it's there hasn't been a lot of competition in that rivalry the last decade, but TCU and Baylor have no love lost. It is still, that is the big rivalry between. So here's the thing: Baylor, TCU, and Tech, all three hate each other, right? Sports hate. Like the Butt Bowl itself is also a big rivalry. But yeah, if you're looking at, I mean, whether TCU, I mean, the Tech games are always more fun, I feel like, but Baylor is the team, like, you have to beat Baylor every year. If you don't beat Baylor, something went horribly, horribly wrong.
Okay. So I need to put Baylor there with Texas Tech as well.
Oh, I would. Yes, I would.
All right. Kind of a three-way rivalry, kind of like the BYU, Utah, TCU. Okay, so looking at some of these others, you'd mentioned Colorado joining the Big Eight, or their longstanding rivalries with the Big Eight, and coming back to the conference. Are there any that stand out? Obviously, Nebraska was their big rival,
right?
Who's no longer in the conference. So who kind of fills that void for them?
It's hard because I would think it's hard. Maybe Kansas State or Oklahoma State if you're looking at an old Big Eight school. But, I also don't know if they developed a big rivalry with Utah in the Pac-12. It's hard to say. It's hard to say with them. Colorado's another one right now that, like, everybody kind of hates, right? Just because of all the media attention they're getting and whatnot. But yeah, that's a difficult one. It's the same thing with, like, because I had on my show this last week, I had a guy from Houston, a guy from Tech, and a guy from Baylor, because we were talking about Texas Football Magazine just came out. And the Houston guy was talking about their lack of a true rival in the conference right now, because a lot of people try to push UCF on them because of the space thing and that they were in the American together. And we're like, oh, we don't really care about them. People try to push Cincinnati. Oh, we don't really care. They might say Tech, but Tech doesn't really care. It's hard. There's not a real easy answer to some of these.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with having a three-way rivalry between these three that kind of leaves Houston on the outside, which they would not like. I think they want to be seen as, yes, we're included amongst all those Texas schools and those old Southwest Conference schools, but I don't know if they're quite there yet. I mean, I still kind of think of them along the lines of Cincy and UCF. And because of UCF's geography, I think it makes a lot of sense. Should we go ahead and put those in, whether they like it or not?
I think Houston and UCF is a fun rivalry. I think that the space angle makes it fun, personally.
Agreed.
Yes.
And I'm with you on forced rivalries, which is exactly what we're going to end up having to do here as we get a little deeper into this. But you know, they do have some history though, and especially with UCF, where they don't have as much history with most of the conference, and they're geographically removed. I think it makes sense to have them, play these schools where there is history and they are a little bit closer together. So for me, I
If it
like.
wasn't for Dana Holgerson leaving, which everyone in Houston is happy that he's gone, but if Dana Holgerson was still in Houston, I would put West Virginia there in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that game last year was friggin' fun. That was the best game all season, that Houston West Virginia game. But now with Dana Holgerson out of the picture, that connection isn't really there anymore. It's just another team.
right.
So.
Yeah, true. Good point. And that's the thing is rivalries could come up out of nowhere. I mean, you could get a Cincy Arizona State rivalry, born from one game, and it could really carry on. But as of right now, that seems less likely than some of these others. So one thing
I'm tempted to fill out Tech, by the way, because I think Tech Oklahoma State is a really natural and fun rivalry. Right, the two of them always talk about who stole guns up from who and who stole the rider on the black horse from who, and it's basically like light beer version of Red River, Tech and Oklahoma State versus Texas and Oklahoma. I would put that in there. Although you could say Tech has history with the Arizona schools. So.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you do with OSU, see, I would include them. I hadn't anticipated both TCU and Baylor. And so I did have, like just kind of thinking through ahead of time. Well, I guess it would be like the Bevel Bowl, right? With these logos. But yeah, they definitely have history with the Arizona schools. And I can't remember, there was one, I can't remember which one. I'm thinking Arizona State that they had more history with, but maybe it's just either one. But I was thinking of having at least one of those schools because of that. And also proximity, because they're, western flank, and Lubbock's really not that far geographically as the crow flies, as they say, to those Arizona schools.
It's a long drive. That's for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, that's where I'm at with it, is like OSU makes sense, but so does, at least one of these Arizona schools, which do not have as many other options, whereas Tech is locked in.
Maybe we come back to them then.
Yeah. Let's do that. You'd mentioned West Virginia though. Do we have, which this would again put Lubbock in it, but I was going to say, what if we had like the John Denver between Colorado, Texas Tech, and West Virginia?
Yeah, so I think Colorado, West Virginia is fun because of the John Denver piece, and it's also East Coast, West Coast, right? That's a fun piece of it, and it's like whose mountains are better. There's a whole lot that you can put in there. I think that's really fun. I also think that I think it makes sense to have Colorado and Utah as rivals because of proximity, because of the Pac-12, and Native Americans hunting buffalo. I mean, who doesn't love that, right? Like that's come on, man. So and also geographics wise, I mean, West Virginia fans will tell you 6 ways from Sunday, we don't give two craps about Cincinnati, but they're right freaking there. They're so close to each other. They were in the Big East together for like, however long that was, like 4 years. I think that makes a lot of sense. And Cincinnati fans will tell you, oh yeah, West Virginia, we can't wait to play West Virginia. We hate West Virginia. West Virginia fans are like, yeah, who are you? Have we met? I don't think about you at all. Right.
Yeah, I've been surprised to get that reaction from fans that they don't really care, but I think it was a little bit longer than I don't know. I feel like it was closer to 10 years. Maybe I'm off on that. I'd have to go double check.
Like Cincinnati, it was probably like 2005 that they joined the Big East. It was probably like 2005, if I had to guess. And then West Virginia left after the 2011 season. So yeah, like 6 years.
Yeah. Okay. So
but let's do Colorado, West Virginia, because I like that.
Yeah, I'm all for Colorado, West Virginia. I'm for it. So that could
John
be
Denver Bowl. Let's do it.
So sweet. All right. So Colorado is on the board. Let's see, because they don't have any like primary rival anymore. But I mean, and that'll develop. All right. So I can speak for BYU and
Yeah,
try to fill it out.
speak.
I think I mean, the Arizona schools, there's some history with, so sure. I mean, they even continued to play throughout their independence era a little bit, and the proximity, and obviously BYU always has a great showing at both of their venues, or they've even played at neutral sites. So either of those would be good. I really like the budding rivalry with Baylor. I mean, it's more of a weird friendship at this point than a rivalry, but I love that too. So, but I know Baylor spots coming up. I guess we can always change it, but are
Yeah.
you opposed to that for BYU and Baylor?
Hey, you're speaking for the Cougars, man. You're speaking for the trees. So,
I meant, does that make sense, or is there someone else
oh
that's
yeah.
higher up for
I
Baylor?
mean, I mean, BYU has more history with TCU, right? Even
Well,
continuing to play in the independent years. But the way you're describing it, it feels kind of like what TCU has got going on with West Virginia, right? Where it's like there's no animosity there. We both came into the Big 12 at the same time, and every year we play, it's something crazy happens, and it's fun, and it's going to be a game that you can't miss, right? Like, it's just kind of a friendly rivalry thing. So yeah,
yeah. So yeah, if BYU, Utah, and TCU, we're not doing all three because you're not, then I don't know. I would almost. It's hard because you're right. BYU and TCU. I know it
if
felt real
BYU's off the
one-sided.
board though, then put Utah as TCU's third.
Well, that is what
Like
I would do because I think back to when I was there, and it's like I didn't really have much of an opinion one way or another about TCU, but then TCU came and apparently hated BYU, and then destroyed us when I you know attended the game, and that wasn't any fun. And so then I was like, oh wait, maybe we don't like you either. Like, where did this come from? So. And so then it kind of became a rivalry, I think, at that point. But okay, so yeah, so Utah's got So TCU's filled out. How are you feeling
I'm
about that?
happy with TCU's. Yeah, I'm very
Okay,
happy with TCU.
BYU or Utah and BYU. I think they're at that point. Then we kind of match them up with the Arizona schools, so they both have a regional, and maybe you fill them out with Colorado as well. I don't think you'd mentioned Colorado and Utah. They tried to make that a thing in the Pac-12. I don't think Colorado won a single game against Utah,
I
and
wouldn't imagine they did.
they were never close. And they called it Rumble in the Rockies, and it just never became a thing. That doesn't mean it couldn't, but I wouldn't just say they're automatically there. I'd almost say Utah, who definitely has more history with Arizona and ASU, would make more sense with one of
Yeah,
those.
yeah,
Okay. Oklahoma State, we haven't done yet because I feel like so many people could put OSU on, like a lot
yeah.
of.
Do Tech. Fill out Tech with Oklahoma State. I feel very strongly about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would think so.
because Tech fans call Oklahoma State Xerox U, right? They just copied everything that we do. Texas, Oklahoma just inherently is a rivalry. The two states. It makes sense.
So
Two very, very awesome atmospheres, very tough places to play.
Yeah, they seem like they naturally fill that void for each other. So I feel good about that. I still feel like I like the idea of Texas, the Arizona schools, or at least one of them, because of the bringing together of the core Big 12 with some of the new members. But okay, so let's see. We've got a couple locked in. So let's see, where else do we go from here? Let's go ahead and let's give them at least one. I would say, I don't know if this is true or not. My feeling, and maybe it's just recent history, is we have a little more history with Arizona. It doesn't really matter. I guess these could be swapped out. So that way they each have at least one Western counterpart from those two.
Yeah.
And then that feels about right, I think, for BYU and Utah.
Perfect.
I don't know. Okay. So, do we do Houston with also with Cincy as well? Since also comes from America, or I see a lot of Cincy and Iowa State as they're both kind of
Yeah.
or
They're both Midwest. Yeah. Yeah, Cincy doesn't really pair with anybody, especially since they're so bad right now, unfortunately. Right. I mean, yeah, you could very easily say, oh, so no, actually, since he does hate UCF, since he and UCF is a thing, I can confirm that because whenever I was doing my team previews, that got brought up by both of them, and how Cincinnati fans love to get under UCF fans' skin because be like, oh no, yeah, we don't care about you, and they're like, how could you not care about us? You know.
Now that you mentioned it, I have seen some of that on Twitter. So, all right.
And then, yeah, I guess you could say Cincinnati's last one could be Iowa State, or maybe Houston. Yeah.
Well, let's
we'll
figure
come
out
back to
Iowa State because they've got some of these other. Would Iowa State and Kansas also be rivals, or not on that same level?
I would say Kansas or Colorado, to be honest. I mean, you could pair Colorado with any of these former Big 12 North schools, right? They're all former Big 8. Iowa State, Kansas State, any of those could pair with Colorado, to be honest.
Okay. So then that means, I guess, who
or
needs
the Arizona schools for that matter, right? Like,
that's true. And that probably makes sense. We should probably give them at least one of these schools and at least one of the other. They need someone from the core Big 8 schools, I think.
Let's consult Wikipedia because Wikipedia does have, they tend to be like, oh, here are historic rivals with, with any given school. Let's see. Shop. All right. Their official rivalries. Here you go. Nebraska, Colorado State, Kansas State, and Utah.
Okay, so let's put
Kansas State.
Because I'm not buying the Utah thing. Plus, they're full. So, oh wait, sorry.
Yeah, for Colorado there.
Yeah. Okay, and then that means K-State is now locked in.
Plus, I mean, if you look at like the identities of both of those schools now, with the flashy Deion Sanders Colorado vibe and the more like hard hat, lunch pail, blue collar vibe of Kansas State, it's a very natural conflict there.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I just did another video. Actually, I don't think it's posted yet, so wait for that and subscribe and go check it out. Where we're talking about our games in the Big 12 that we're most hyped for this season, and I said the Colorado Kansas State game largely for that reason. I think it's early on enough in the season too that both very well could be undefeated still, and yeah, just the complete different personas of those programs right now should be a really good one. Cool. So they're locked in. Houston, I still don't know what to make of them. I'm sure they'd like some more of those other programs, but I think everyone else in Texas is locked up. So,
yeah, and I think we've gotten the Texas schools very correct.
Houston with, I'm gonna do it with Cincy, right? Or
yeah, do them with Cincy. That makes more. That makes honestly that makes more sense than Cincinnati and Iowa State, even though the regional swap them. You've got them in the same.
Because they were also together in Conference USA too, right? So I mean, they have some history.
Yeah, they would have been. Yeah.
So
you got the logos in the opposite column.
Oh, yeah, they can't be rivals with themselves. So,
well, hey, a lot of us hate ourselves. You know, that's the truth.
That's true. Maybe
I think all college football fans hate themselves to some degree. Let's be honest. Why would we put ourselves through this?
Yeah. Well, my wife asked me that all the time, especially last season. So let's see. All right. Coming to okay, so OSU seems like they're let's kind of lock them in. So I think with they could have been fun with Utah. I know you talked about that in your video, but they haven't even played each other yet. So I'm going to reserve that rivalry and see if it turns into anything. I know they both think they're going to run the conference, but
yeah.
So
I mean, Oklahoma State kind of has a thing with Iowa State. I feel like because they're they're big wrestling schools, right? Yeah, I don't know. I kind of vibe with that.
I'm good with that. I mean, they're both part of that Big 8, so I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they're both Tornado Alley, you know, like, I don't know. I kind of,
Sure, I
it makes
buy it.
sense to me.
I buy it. So, and then the question is, Colorado. Can we put them with? Oh wait, why do I have
I
BYU?
think of the schools that are left, I would either put them with Arizona State or Iowa State, I think, or maybe Arizona. But yeah, one of the two of those,
Okay, that
or
was
maybe
Colorado.
Oklahoma State. Maybe Oklahoma State, to be honest.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. I feel like Colorado works with several of these.
yeah, they do. How about what do you think? Iowa State with Kansas?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's do that and then see how this. So that would mean Iowa State is locked up. That means Colorado. Yeah, either Kansas or OSU. I don't know if I see a strong case one way or the other.
Or the Arizona schools.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, let's give them at least one of those. You think ASU over Arizona?
I mean, they're closer to ASU.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look and see if there's been any sort of more history one way or another. But let's go with ASU right now.
They're geographically closer.
So,
Tempe
uh,
is closer to Boulder than Tucson is. Tucson's like on the border.
yeah, Colorado's been rolled over this. They're basically their entire Pac-12 tenure. So,
Yeah.
not sure they have strong rivalries with anybody there. Um, all right, so
Okay, hey, put Houston and Arizona together because it's a basketball piece, right?
ooh,
Or Kansas, or you could do Arizona and Kansas because of basketball.
oh, oh, does that work? Okay, how does that work out with the rest of these? Okay, Arizona and Kansas. I like that.
Yeah, I like Arizona and Kansas actually a lot
We'll
because of the
see.
basketball angle.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so UCF. I'm going to do UCF in West Virginia. They'll probably
Yeah,
both
they're East Coast. Yeah, yeah, I like that.
like that. So they'll both hate that, but UCF needs some.
And honestly, Houston and Oklahoma State, I don't hate either because again, you got the Texas and Oklahoma angle, um, and that's pretty much it.
You didn't get
But
any of the other Texas schools, but they're at least getting, one of the big boys from that kind of hateful eight, Big
yeah,
12. So
yeah.
that gives them that tie-in.
Look at this. I love this.
All right, all right.
Great job,
So,
us.
all right. Looking at all of this and channel your inner personas of all these schools. I mean, projecting what would the fan bases of these respective teams feel about this? Looking at this.
I think it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, we've been very pragmatic about this. We've put a lot of thought into this, so I think this makes a lot of sense. There's not one of these, outside of maybe Houston, Oklahoma State, that you look at and you're like, what? There's history with all of these rivalries. There's fun eccentricities. There's geography, all the things you look for. Between two schools that hate each other. So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and like we said, obviously there could be completely random rivalries that just start out of nowhere, and maybe two schools end up for whatever reason. Maybe there's a couple close games 2 years in a row or something, or basketball as well. It could spill over. So you never know. But right now we're going with this as our rivals. And what I like, and I should have mentioned this at the top of the video, but looking at it, like I feel like if you had some sort of schedule like this that locked in a few teams every year to give these schools consistency. Let's say it's this for TCU with Baylor, Tech, and Utah, and then that gives you 6 other games, and that means in a 4-year period you're still playing every school twice because that's
Yeah.
12 because you have 15 schools, so you subtract 3 from that. That's 12 more to fill those 6. I think the math works. I can't talk through it, but I think it
Hey,
works.
I'm a history teacher, man. Don't look at me.
So I think that allows them to still play every school in the conference twice over 4 years. And so, and still gives you a little bit of consistency in each school's own, like, instead of doing pods, you have each school's like personal pod,
Yeah.
where their own set of rivalries each year instead of locking them into specific regional pods, and what makes sense. And then we get more of that consistency playing each other. And that is where you start really building those rivalries and teams breeding content, which is harder and harder, I think, with so much turnover with a lot of these schools. You might have so many new players or players leaving that there might not be that hate from the previous season that kind of spills over, that really allows these rivalries to bloom, which is, I guess, downside to the portal and all of this realignment. But I'm super excited though about we can stop worrying about the transition and everything, and it's here, and we can just kind of move forward now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens next summer, with all this ACC stuff. I mean, with every passing day, it looks more and more likely that Florida State might have one foot out the door, and then all of a sudden, guess who's picking up the pieces, right? We may be talking about Louisville and Virginia Tech and, Miami maybe even next year. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, who would be? Let's say it goes to 4, because that's the common thought is, okay, we go to 20. What would be the 4 from the ACC that you think are realistic that you would like to see come in? Because that would obviously change things. Obviously, for West Virginia, even Cincy, it's a game changer in terms of rivalries.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and Virginia are off the board, which that seems to be, all of the rumblings seem to be like they're headed for greener pastures, which leaves everybody else scrambling for what to do. I think I would love to have Miami, right? I mean, they haven't been worth a crap in 20 years, but it's a huge brand, and it'd be a fun school to play, fun place to go, and they draw a lot of eyeballs. I'd love to have Miami.
Would they be Would they be the biggest brand in the conference?
That's a good question. They very well might be, yeah. Unless TCU wins the national championship between now and then. No, that's not gonna. But yeah, they probably are. They probably are if you bring them in, just because. Yeah, they probably are the biggest brand. So then, yeah, Miami. I'd love to have Virginia Tech. I think that's just a really great cultural fit, and it's another rival. It's a existing rival for West Virginia, another travel partner for them. I had always been very much in the bring in Pitt because I love the backyard brawl. I think it's such a fun freaking game. But I don't know that outside of that, they really add all that much, right? West Virginia already kind of gives you that Pittsburgh television market. So I don't know necessarily if you need to add Pitt, but I would love to have NC State. NC State would be really freaking fun from a basketball perspective and from a football perspective. I think they're a fun cultural fit. And then Louisville, I think. I'd love to have Louisville. Again, you got rivalries with Cincinnati, some history with TCU, history with West Virginia. It's another school out in that part of the country. And, great basketball, fun cultural fit, all that good stuff. Those would be my 4. Miami, Virginia Tech, NC State, and Louisville.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned cultural fit, and I'll tell you, so I'm actually East Coast. I'm in Virginia, and I'll tell you, I see probably more than half the Virginia Tech gear I see is camo gear, and it just feels like that would fit right in. And then in the college baseball World Series, NC State wore some camo uniforms. So I mean, they're already prepping for their transition to the Big 12.
There you go.
So I think it's a match made in heaven. So yeah, those would be great picks, which would obviously, if and when that happens, we can come back and we can rearrange this whole board and make some new rivalries all set up.
I'll count on it, man. I'll count on it.
But yeah, this should be fun. Hey, look at this. If you're a fan of any of these schools of the Big 12 and know about the history and these rivalries, if we're overlooking any key rivalries that need to be included in this, or we got any just way wrong, please let us know in the comments who you want to see. Again, you saw our thought process on this. As Clint said, we put so much thought into it. So, and tons of research.
40 minutes on this, man. Yeah. We put a lot of effort.
That's right. So, not to mention the hours of research we did ahead of time. So, all right. But yeah, let us know, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And also please go check out Clint and all his stuff between his various channels. Very funny stuff. And I will put links to all those in the comment section below. So in the comment or in the description below. There we go. Go check it out. Follow him. I promise you will laugh and you'll enjoy it. So thank you so much for joining me, Clint.
Thanks for having me, Trevor. Yeah, give me the channels are at Big 12 BOCFB. That's my Tuesday night show, The Biggest 12, and at Clint Foster Comedy. That's where you're going to find all of those fun sketches. I am literally working on one right now. So by the time you are watching this video, hopefully it will be live. We're bringing some of those ACC schools into the fold, so you're not going to want to miss that. And thanks for having me, Trev.
Awesome. Thanks. Go Cougs. See ya.